Spring, we're back. It's been 15 days since our last Between the Pipes. The Four Nations face-off has come and gone, and it was an absolute hit, just a symphony from the NHL. One of the most highly watched National Hockey League events of our lifetime. Four Avs participated in it. Three of them walk away with the championship. Devon Taves, Cale Makar, and Nathan MacKinnon with Team Canada. And as I said at the end of the game, after a tournament that made me feel like I was 12 again, like made me love the sport of hockey like I was a kid. And I still love the sport of hockey, but I haven't felt like that in years. After that thing went away, what I was thinking was, how the fuck do we go back to regular season hockey after this thing? And lo and behold, the first game back for the Avs is a complete snooze fest.
Well, it's funny you put it that way because, a lot of talk towards the end, and then after the Four Nations was, is this going to help the NHL? Is this going to help the NHL? Well, regular season hockey doesn't hit the same as what we just saw. Even if the Avs dominated today, it's a game in Nashville. We kind of pick up where we left off, even though the Avs' last regular season game was a really nice win in Edmonton, the type of win that was like, okay, now once again we feel like this team can win a cup again. But before that, there were some kind of good but rather lackadaisical offensive performances, lackluster offensive performances, solid play from the Avs, but they haven't really gone crazy offensively in the Natchez era, but they played well. They're just trying to find their way offensively. They only get one goal tonight. Nathan MacKinnon may have been tripped twice in this game with no calls. That hurts. Nashville decides to play a really defensive style game tonight. They're terrible. They've had an awful season, but they decided to just D up. Juuse Saros got some reps in the Four Nations playing for Finland.
Bad reps. He was terrible for Finland. He was horrible. If I'm a member of Team Finland and I watch the tape from tonight's game and compare it to the Four Nations, I'm going like, what? Where the hell were you, Juuse?
Yeah, he got benched for Kevin Lankinen in those, but he still got reps nonetheless. Let's see, Forsberg and Nyquist played for Team Sweden, but were Nate, Cale, and Taves, because they had to play a full tournament. They had to play an overtime of a final, whereas Sweden was out. What was it, on Monday? Was their last game. Finland and Saros didn't even play on that in that final game. So maybe Nate, Cale, and Devon were a little beat up / tired, and that can be to blame for the one goal scored today.
Totally fine, right? Like, I expected those four guys to be relatively slow, especially the three Canadians. I expected them to not be at their best, but they were the best players on the ice for the Avs. Like, the reason why they lost this game was because lines 2 through 4 didn't show up, which for me is, if you're really serious about these 2 points, and they get another crack at it tomorrow against St. Louis, and if you split against them, that's all right. Manson doesn't make the trip. He's close, maybe a week or two away. Nichushkin is ready as soon as the New Jersey game. I think they just saw this weird return where you go back-to-back afternoon games and went, we don't want to rush him back. Let's just have him stay at home, continue to get his reps in. He'll be back in the New Jersey game. As soon as that happened, I went, you might lose this game. I don't really care that they lost the game, but I care kind of how they lost it. Everybody else, you guys had 15 days off. Like, if there's any game that those dudes, that Nate, Cale, Devon, and Lecky can look at you and go, hey, fellas, your turn to freaking row the boat. No one else did, right? Sam Malinsky gets a banger of a shot on goal when that one-timer had to be great for him to shoot, really fun for him to shoot. Everything else, no one else was dangerous tonight. And I think that was an issue. Like, if you can really point one thing out, you look at lines 2 through 4 and pairings 2 and 3, and you go, where the hell were you?
Well, I feel lied to because, and granted, I don't really care, but I was told Valerian Nichushkin was going to be back for this game, and then last week we found out, oh, not so fast. But it's good to see him out there, and he was in the first lines, the full contact white sweater, I believe. Hey, Casey Middlestat was in that green fourth line sweater this week, but he ends up playing on the second line. But man, yeah, I wish Val was back as I was promised. But hey,
Yeah.
look, glad to see him back out on the ice, and it appears he's close. There's no mystery of what's going on with him when you see him at the practice facility actually skating. But yeah, that's it. Look, Juuse Parssinen, former Pred, Nashville waived him this season, or they traded him to the Avs. They gave up on him. They gave up on that kid for absolutely nothing. He's on your second line. That's a player that's on your second line right now. Jonathan Drouin, I thought, had a good game. He sets Malinsky up for Sam's bomb. Wouldn't you know it, Justin Barron scores. Moments later, the key cog to the Arturi Lehkonen trade. He's no longer with the Montreal Canadiens. They gave up on him. He's now a Nashville Predator, but go figure the Lecky piece bites you in this game. But, that's a good reminder right there with Justin Barron scoring for Nashville tonight, and he's still so young and it's so early in his career. When you have these prospects and you have a chance to go trade for what appears to be a bona fide middle line, turned out to be a guy who can play on your top line player in Arturi Lehkonen. They trade Drew Hellison for Josh Manson. All the guys, trade these guys. Trade these guys. Because Montreal gave up on Justin Barron. The odds of these guys hitting is actually very low. So if you have a decent level prospect, and hey, did you see what the Pittsburgh Penguins did today in Sid's triumphant return from lifting the Four Nations? Absolutely hammered by the Capitals at home. Trade Cal Ritchie, trade whatever the hell it takes to go get Sidney Crosby and get him out of that wasteland that has become the Pittsburgh Penguins.
I completely agree. If getting Sidney Crosby here means saying goodbye to Callum Ritchie and Mikhail Gulyayev, or a combination of Gulyayev, Ritchie, and Nabokov, I go, see ya. See ya. Just trade
remember during the Lehkonen trade, like, they trade Justin Barron, and his name was the one floated around. And even I was kind of like, I kind of like Justin Barron. Like, late first round pick. He's actually seems to be developing all right in his early years. Look at him now. Look at him now. He's already on another team. Montreal said, even though we got you for Lehkonen, and I'm sure Montreal would still love to have Arturi Lehkonen. They just gave up on the guy.
Who's the American defenseman that they traded?
What was that?
Remember, who's the American defenseman they traded to Anaheim for Manson?
Drew Hellison.
He
hasn't done shit. I haven't seen his name.
Yeah.
That trade was several years ago now. So if Drew Hellison was something, we probably would have seen him by now. Cal Ritchie, look, he looked okay in the early stages of the season. Gulyayev, how many Yeyes are in that name? He looks fun in the KHL. If Sidney Crosby's on the line, you trade him all day. Trade all of them.
I think I do the same thing for. I'll hold out for my Seth Jones thing. It would still have to take a third team getting involved, likely, to help facilitate some of that salary. But I'm on board for doing any one of those three players to get Seth Jones in here too. I think you hit it on the head. You don't have a can't miss prospect in the organization. There isn't one of those. Like, you don't have a guy coming up the pipeline that for sure is a top 6 forward or a top 4 pair or top 2 pair defenseman. You don't know for sure that Ilya Nabokov is the truth in net. You think he is, but
he's
you
the
also
best looking. Like, Nabokov's, I would rank him number 1 of Avs prospects. I'd rank Nabokov 1.
I think for me, it's Nabokov 1, Gulyayev 2, Ritchie 3. That's my ranking right now, and I like all three players. I think they can help, but you're in a cup window, and if someone comes knocking and that's the price for an impact player, I say yes to it. I don't know. Tonight's game, I kind of went into it going, I think they could probably lose. I think they probably will lose this game. and I was okay with it. You got to find a way to get 2 points against St. Louis tomorrow, and St. Louis did. They did sit Bennington tonight. Bennington and Hellebuck not playing in the St. Louis Winnipeg matchup. There's a bunch of back-to-backs. Like 14 games tonight, a bunch of teams playing back-to-back tomorrow as the league tries to get back into their regular season swing. It was a snoozer. You kind of expected it to be that way. It's a weird way to jump back in on guys who didn't really get a rest. Your best players did not get a rest. I expect them to get 2 points tomorrow, and it is a much-needed break until Wednesday when they take on New Jersey at home.
Yeah, it is funny. Winnipeg and St. Louis playing right now, and that could have been a rematch of Hellebuck and Bennington just 2 days later. But it's the two backups, Comrie and Hofer, going for the Blues tonight. But so we'll see Bennington tomorrow, and we'll see Mackenzie Blackwood tomorrow. What did you make of the decision to go with Scott Wedgwood tonight? I mean, it's a former team for Scott. We saw them do this against Dallas recently, and it paid off. Wedgwood got the win against the Stars. It's one of Wedgwood's many former teams. Wedgwood most recently played for Nashville. I like throwing dudes out there against their former teams. And, while Blackwood is clearly the one on this team, Wedgwood is a very good backup, and I'm comfortable throwing him in any situation. Although, now on the other side, it's your first game back. If you want to set a tone, maybe you go with your one in net. Did they view St. Louis as the larger threat between Nashville and St. Louis? St. Louis is higher in the standings than Nashville. We'll see if that pays off, holding up Blackwood for tomorrow.
They didn't lose because of Scott Wedgwood. They lost because of lines 2 through 4 and the bottom two pairs on their defense. That's why they lost tonight. The guys who were resting for 2 weeks and who were fresh were rusty, right? And the guys who were coming off of playing really, really intense international hockey as recently as 48 hours ago looked tired and were still the most impactful players on the ice. That's why they lost. Mackenzie Blackwood playing tonight doesn't impact it whatsoever, right? You're not winning this game 1-0. You lost because Val Nichushkin was not in the lineup. You lost because Josh Manson was not back in the lineup. And you lost because this team is still incomplete. This team still needs to make another trade or two. You have to figure out who your second line center is. Is Casey Middlestat going to be here for the future? You have to figure out if you can get a middle pair defenseman. Is Seth Jones going to be available? Can you trade for another D-man by the time that March 7 rolls around? That's the reason why you lost tonight, not because of goaltending. I back up Bednar's decision to play Wedgie tonight. I do believe St. Louis is the more dangerous team of the two. Nashville's what a disaster of an offseason that turned into. I don't know. Maybe you could pluck a couple of players from Nashville if Barry Trotz wants to burn that thing to the ground.
Hey, before you leave Bridgestone Arena tonight, and speaking of Bridgestone Arena, I mean that second goal is shot off the end board, and that's just is that a home ice thing there at Bridgestone?
Yep.
Are there different caroms off of different boards in different arenas?
There sure are. It's a lot less pronounced now as the NHL, has rules and regulations in place, but it's not a perfect science, right? Like there used to be times where like rinks weren't a perfect 200 by 85, depending on where you played in. But most famously is Joe Louis Arena in Detroit. Those end boards were springboards, and Detroit played it to a T. Nashville does too, and it's known throughout the league that those boards bounce for one reason or another. It could be how they pack the boards against the seating. It's literally just how the rink management did it when they built the thing. They're springy, and it was a good shot. And Marchessault was lucky enough to be standing in the right spot, and the puck isn't bouncing. Way she goes. Juuse Saros has sucked the whole season long. Like he has been. Talk about bad signings. Juuse Saros has been a terrible re-sign when they moved on from Yaroslav Oskarov and sent him to San Jose as the number one goaltending prospect in the league. Saros has been terrible. He looked like the guy that signed a 7-year extension in the offseason tonight.
Yeah, he was very good. Marchessault gets that game-winning goal. It's fun, I'm looking at their lineup tonight, and you got Marchessault, Canadian, Stamkos, Canadian, Ryan O'Reilly, Canadian, and man, like if this was 4 years ago, best on best for Team
Yep.
Canada, like those dudes are on that team. But here we are in 2025, and all three of those dudes are too old and too washed for that team. But Ryan O'Reilly's the guy. Like, if there's a guy who makes sense to bring in, it would be him. I mean, Sidney Crosby's the pipe dream. Someone in the chat says Crosby's not coming here. He wants to retire a pen. I mean, I will direct you to that score, that Penguins Capitals score today. And look, if Sidney Crosby doesn't leave the Pittsburgh Penguins, then we'll see maybe the Olympics, but that's what he will play for. Will be international play.
That'll be it.
Those will be the only games that matter for Sidney Crosby. Will be games that he plays for Team Canada.
Kyle Dubas isn't turning that thing around. The fact that Kyle Dubas still has a job in the NHL is beyond me after the debacle that he put Toronto through and how they're digging themselves out of just the cap hell that they put themselves into. And he gets a job with Pittsburgh, and what does he do? He re-signs Malkin. He re-signs Letang, two guys that are putting up fine seasons, but they were re-signed because of what they did for the organization in the past. Washington, on the other side, think about all the players that used to play with Alexander Ovechkin in the heyday of Ovechkin, Crosby, Caps, Pens. The big-time players that were there, there are two of them left. Two of them. John Carlson and Tom Wilson. Alex Semin, long gone. Nicholas Backstrom, long gone. Evgeny Kuznetsov, long gone. All of those guys went away. And Washington is now having a resurgence, a renaissance. They've got 37 wins on the season. They scored 8 goals tonight against Pittsburgh. Everyone says Sid wants to retire a pen. I do believe he does. I believe he wants to be Mario Lemieux. It makes sense, right? And you saw how long at the beginning of the Four Nations when Lemieux came out in Montreal and was like the honorary captain when they were announcing Canada and Sweden in that first game. Sid waited forever to the point where Mario had to go, all right, come on up. Like, I'm done getting my ovation. Sid realizes how important that is. He also is the most competitive motherfucker in the league. Like, if you listen to some of the stories that he tells about himself, that other guys tell about training with him, Nathan McKinnon tells a story about the first time that he ever went and trained in the offseason with Sidney Crosby. And Nate was like 16 years old. He was just coming off of playing at Shattuck St. Mary's. He was just about to go in to Halifax and play in the queue alongside Jonathan Drouin. And they are training on a hill. And the whole point is to run up the hill 10 times, right? And Sid is just beating him every single time. He's beating him 9 out of 10 times. And Nate, as a young buck, gets the better out of him on the 10th. And he thinks he's done with it. And what does he feel? About 5 yards until he gets to the top of the hill, Sid's about to get beat. He grabs a 16-year-old by the ankles and drags him down the hill and then runs up himself so that Sid wins 10 out of 10. If you think that's a story about a guy that is okay with rotting the rest of his career as a point-per-game player, I got another thing coming to you.
I mean, you look across sports nowadays and Tom Brady will be my number one example of you don't have to play your entire career with one team. And Canada winning that Four Nations, like that was the recipe. That's what I wanted from an Avalanche standpoint of Sid winning gold with McKinnon, Makar, and Taves and to get a little taste of it. And so yeah, if you were rooting for Team USA, I get it. But from an Avalanche perspective, that's exactly what I wanted. The ball is in his court. And, look, what I love a D-man like Seth Jones, and do I think that they need to improve the D, certainly at least with one addition on that blue line? Yes. But, another one-goal performance tonight. And in the Natchez era, while it's been good offensively, it feels like there's still another level that this team needs to hit. I don't know if Valeri Nichushkin might be the answer in and of himself. But shoring up that 2C, and no one would be better than Sidney Crosby. I really am looking at offense right now. I'm looking at offense more than defense. I think they need to get more dangerous offensively, which is an interesting thing to say considering the star power that they have offensively. But in this league, it's so tight. I think Sid, that's number one on my dream list. O'Reilly number two. I think they need to beef up this offense, and a 1-goal performance today just makes me feel so much more in that direction.
I'm on board with O'Reilly because I think he's going to be the most cost-effective way to shore up second center spring. I think O'Reilly's not going to cost a lot of money. I don't think he's going to cost a lot of prospects.
I love a center. Can the Avs go, though? Can the Avs go trade for Mikko Rantanen again? Did you see the report that, like, Carolina would retain salary on him to where he would be like a $2.3 million cap hit for the rest of the season?
The only team that can't reacquire him is Chicago. Colorado, if you remember, did not retain any salary on that deal. Had Colorado retained salary, they would not have been able to recapture that player because of the salary retention. Chicago can sign him in the offseason because his contract expires in the offseason, so that doesn't hurt them whatsoever. I don't see him coming back, man. I mean, it'd be funny.
I don't either. It would be hilarious, though. And, man, I mean, like, I think they need offense, and Mikko would be offense. And despite, and look, do I have my qualms about Mikko? Sure, but on a super cheap cap hit rental for the rest of the season, sign me up for that.
I mean, what would it take is the question. It would have to be him being a complete misfit in Carolina. And I don't know if he's a complete misfit. I think he fits. I just don't think he is. I don't think he's the driver of offense that Octagon Sports believes he is. I still think he's an amazing player. I still think he's a Hall of Fame player. I just don't know if. I don't know. I see Carolina making that trade. You move on from Drury, you move on from Picks, you move on from Marty Necas. And for them to go, yeah, that ain't going to work. That's such a hard pill to swallow without at least giving it a chance to flourish in the playoffs. Like, imagine having to explain that to your fan base. Remember that guy that all of you out there wanted us to re-sign in Marty Necas? Yeah, we traded him for a 12-game rental. And then we flipped him for a couple of picks and maybe a prospect. That's Kerry Coffins to the Dallas Mavericks game type of stuff.
Yeah, you're almost in too deep. If you're Carolina, your return would have to get you a player on the level of a Necas in addition to like another asset or two. And I'm not sure that deal's out there, but what I saw today or yesterday was that Carolina is trying to negotiate with Mikko. They want him back. They're just not. It seems like a repeat of what was happening with Mikko and the Avalanche. Like, they're negotiating, saying, hey, man, like, let's get this done. But Mikko's not. He's not signing. So that tells me he thinks Carolina is giving him a lower offer than what he can get on the open market.
Carolina's not going to sign him to $14 million, man. They're not going to do it.
Well, the way Mikko's played so far with the Hurricanes.
Unless they win. Like, if Carolina gets to a cup final, they sign him to a $14 million deal in the offseason. Because if they get there, Mikko will be a massive part of them getting through the East. Well, if they don't get to it, they're not signing him to 14 unless they get to a cup.
Speaking of scores from tonight, Hockey Night in Canada. This is on NHL Network, even in Sportsnet in Canada. So I got a little Chris Cuthbert in my ears while I was waiting for your post-game show to wrap up there, Raj. And Toronto went up 4-0 in the first period on Carolina. And that is your score. It remains 4-0 midway through the third. So Mikko and the Hurricanes are getting goose-egged in Toronto. Mikko's up there on the top line with Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis, who we saw for Team Canada. They've produced 0 goals, not just that line, but the entire team. The way I thought Mikko played well for Team Finland, but not well enough to warrant, any sort of breakout moment that would suggest, $14 million is what he is worth.
I didn't see it.
Since he's gone to Carolina, whether it's playing for the Hurricanes or Team Finland, Mikko has not made himself any money. If anything, he has lost himself money.
Yeah, he's brought him back into the situation of like, could he re-sign with Colorado in the offseason?
Especially with that cap going up.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Especially if it continues to be a failed experiment, which it has been. It's a small data set, but you only have 2 weeks to figure this out. Like March 7 comes really fast, guys. Really fast, March 7. That's the trade deadline, like 1 p.m. or something on in Mountain Standard Time. 1 p.m. or 2 p.m., something like that. They're going to make a couple moves. They have cap space. I think they make a move for a defenseman. I think if there is serious strife with Sid, I think Chris McFarland can go to Dubas and go, I have a deal on the table. If it's interesting to you, bring it to Sid and we'll have the conversation. Because it's very clear he really enjoyed playing with Nathan MacKinnon. You bring up a good point, though, is playing in Torino next year in the Winter Olympics and maybe a World Cup of hockey the next season, because it'll be 40 by the time that this World Cup rolls back around in 87, or rather 87 is when he was born, in 2027, is playing for Team Canada in the Olympics and in the World Cup. Is that enough to keep him going? Is that enough to keep him slogging through what's going to be 30 win seasons for the Pittsburgh Penguins, which he's never done this before. He did this once. He did this in his rookie season with Pittsburgh. That's it. And then they made the playoffs every single year after that. This is uncharted territory for Sidney Crosby. He's been a winner his whole life. He's been a winner since he was 8 years old.
It could be enough for Sid. It's not nothing. Winning these best on best international tournaments is a big deal. I mean, he's already done it. He won the gold with Canada in 2010. He just won the Four Nations, which the Four Nations in and of itself, like, who knows if we'll ever see the Four Nations the way it was constructed again. That could end up being a one-off.
It's supposed to be a one-off. According to the league, it's a one-off. So
that'll be one of those, like, hey, remember that. Remember the Four Nations. But he wins gold. Oh, and so, yeah, that could be enough of a carrot to dangle in front of him to, I'll play for the shit Penguins because I want to retire a Penguin and have that legacy thing attached to me with this franchise and organization. Yeah. Playing for Canada in the Olympics and World Cup coming up could be enough, but winning the Four Nations, winning Olympic gold are all great. It's not the same. The peak is winning a Stanley Cup. Like, that's the thing that Connor McDavid just won Four Nations MVP. And if he never wins a cup, he will get clowned.
McKinnon won Four Nations MVP.
Oh, excuse me. Game-winning goal. That's what I meant. I meant game-winning goal. He gets the game-winning goal. He has the great moment. Great moment for Connor McDavid. You still got to win a cup.
You have to. And that is the thing with Sid, right? He has won everything multiple times, which is crazy to think. He's done everything multiple times. He has multiple gold medals. He has multiple world championships. He has multiple MVPs. He's done everything. And not only done it once. So there is the thought process that he's like, I've done enough. I am the game's greatest ambassador to this day, and I will continue to be long into my post-playing career. I just see the guy as a competitor, and I hate to watch his talent. It'd be such a different conversation if, like, remember when Patrick Marleau, speaking of like a guy who never won anything, Marleau, other than international tournaments when he was with Team Canada. Remember when Patrick Marleau was going through those years with Toronto and trying to chase cups, and he ended up in Pittsburgh for a little bit, but he just wasn't the same guy. He was slow. He wasn't impactful on either side of the puck. Like, Sid is still at the top of his game. He's not put up 140 points, but he's a point per game player at 37, 38 years old. I just don't want to see him put out to pasture when the dog can still run.
The
It's
most
still
important
hunting.
the most important thing is winning Stanley Cups, and it has been years since Sidney Crosby has even sniffed a Stanley Cup. So look, yeah, gold medals are great. International success is great, but it's not winning a Stanley Cup. So we'll see. Speaking of that, though, with this Four Nations, look, yeah, I've heard Nathan McKinnon allude to it. I was listening to some of your studio duties today, Raj. You played an interview of Nate talking to Mark Mosier, an interview that they did, and I've heard Nate mention it twice in media he's done after the Four Nations that a lot of people thought, is this going to be an all-star game? Yeah, I was unsure because it replaced the fucking all-star game. I mean, it's in the exact same time frame of the all-star game, yet these players put their bodies on the line and treated it like it was big-time hockey. I love it. It was great for the sport, but I was a little hesitant. Like, heaven forbid Kale, Nate, or Devon got hurt. It looks like the only player who sustained a long-term injury coming out of this was Shea Theodore of Team Canada. And isn't that hilarious that it's a Vegas Golden Knight that it happens to? And lo and behold, it seems like he'll be back for the playoffs so they can LTIR that thing.
They sure can. They sure
But
can. Wait for Vegas to come take your favorite player on the trade block.
oh, what if Mikko becomes a Vegas Golden Knight? My
Oh my
goodness.
God. Don't even do. It's so real that could happen too. It's so real that Vegas could make that happen.
Well, now you put Theodore on LTIR, and that opens up Mikko cap space, and bam, Theodore's back for the playoffs. But look, it's funny that it was a night that it happened to, and I see in the chat McAvoy got a bit of a scare. He did, but it seems like he'll be okay. Brady Tkachuk did not play tonight. I actually didn't check. Matthew Tkachuk didn't play tonight either, right? He must
No,
not have.
Matthew Tkachuk is outside of Shea Theodore. Matthew Tkachuk is probably the second most concerning injury coming out of the Four Nations. Austin Matthews didn't play for Toronto this evening because of upper body soreness. I think that's just an extra day. Hey man, you played a bunch. Take the day off. We'll be fine. I was hoping that the Avs may have done that for Nate. And Devon, like Kale didn't really play. He played obviously that last game, but the illness kept him out for a couple. I was hoping they were going to do that for Nate. They didn't. They chose not to. Matthew Tkachuk might be the other one where he was on the roster but hardly played the last two games. There was something going on with his lower body. I think he tweaked it by like hitting
I think it's
the
a
post
groin.
early on.
I think it's a groin he's dealing with.
It felt like that. It sure did. The league came out relatively healthy for a super physical set of games.
At least next year it's the Olympics. Like that's the true prestige. So I'm cool. And will that be the All-Star break or whatever break they take next year?
Yes.
Will just be the Olympic break?
Yes.
Okay.
And then what they announced is that they have a commitment to start the World Cup of Hockey it's either the next year after, so 2027, or they're going to do World Cup of Hockey in 2 years. So it'll be Olympics next February. So February 26th is the Winter Olympics. And then I think they're going to do the World Cup of Hockey in 2028 with an off year in between. I could be wrong on that, but they have committed to that. So the Four Nations is going to go away, but there will be an in-season World Cup of Hockey where they will expand it to 8 nations. So it'll be likely USA, Canada, Finland, Sweden, Russia, Czechia, Slovakia, Germany. Those are probably your 8.
Yes, those are your 8.
That sounds right, and they'll have to pluck some non-NHL players from
Switzerland maybe instead of Slovakia, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, there could be something.
Either way,
they have said that they will not have any created teams, like made-up teams, Team Europe, Team North America. They're not going to do that. It'll be 8 nations. Who knows who's going to be that 8th one? But I think those 7 are probably pretty solid there with the Czechs, the Germans, and the Russians added to the Four Nations teams from this year. you'll see who that eighth team could be. They'll have to pluck some non-NHL members to make up the Czechia team, the German team, the Slovakia team, maybe the Russian team. There's probably enough NHLers to fill out a Russian team, but they'll be fine. I'm excited to see that. It'll be cool.
Look, international hockey, it's on par. It depends on your taste, but it doesn't rate the same. It's not the world sport like soccer, but that's the sport that it's closest to in terms of international play. It's soccer. I mean, these hockey games are awesome, and it's better than basketball. The World Baseball Classic was fun with Otani last year, but it's light years better than baseball. International hockey, like that, the public can get behind international hockey. I'm not sure how much it gets into the NHL. I'm not sure there will be this big boon for the NHL, but international hockey itself, that has proven to be a massive and legitimate ratings draw for casual fans. And I get it. I absolutely get why.
It's a hit. I mentioned the numbers. They put up 9.3 million in the US alone, north of 16 million in North America. It was the most watched non-football broadcast in ESPN streaming history. It was the most watched cable broadcast in the country this year that wasn't NFL, college football, or election coverage. A hockey game.
Unbelievable.
A hockey game.
Unbelievable.
I agree. I don't think you're going to see like this. Like the NHL is not going to overtake the NBA overnight. It's not going to happen. Like you just don't have the viewership. More people watch the NBA. It's going to help the league tremendously. Where it's going to help is that you will see more people watch it. It's not going to overtake the NBA. It's certainly not going to overtake the NFL, but more dollars will start to come into the league because more people will be watching on ESPN, watching on TNT, and therefore the cap will go up. So it will help your team. It'll help the Avs. Will it mean that hockey is the second most popular sport in the country? Probably not. But honestly, I don't care that it is. I just care that the league is viable and making money and the caps are going up and the Avs can continue to extend a championship window.
Hey, let's take this moment before we get out of here. Little Olympic preview. Why not? Where the gap between Team USA and Team Canada appears to be like absolutely nothing. It appears to be an even matchup. If Matthew Tkachuk doesn't hurt his groin, if Quinn Hughes didn't get hurt just before the Four Nations, Team USA could easily win gold. I mean, they are right there with Team Canada. They have a goaltending advantage. Like Binnington plays well in the final, but overall, Hellebuck gives them the advantage. I'm curious to see if Mackenzie Blackwood can go ahead and have a good stretch run with the Avs and a good playoffs. Maybe he finds himself on that roster and maybe he gets playing time in that next Olympics for Team Canada. But if Team USA is healthy and they have maybe a little more of a complete roster as far as what's available to them, I actually might put them as the favorites to win that thing.
I don't know if I can make them the favorites. Canada is just so deep. And I said that before the final. I was talking, on the morning sprint about it and just going, they're so good. They're so deep. There were roster omissions that did cost the Americans this tournament. And if they are omitted on the next roster, that's a huge issue. I thought Chris Kreider being on this team was a mistake. I thought keeping Kyle Connor, who has the most goals of any American-born player this year in the National Hockey League, was a healthy scratch for the gold medal game to put either Kreider or Matthew Tkachuk, who couldn't play. Matthew Tkachuk couldn't skate in that final game. And I understand the Tkachuk brothers, the Bash brothers things. He wasn't effective. He literally didn't play for the second half of the hockey game.
He wanted to. He couldn't.
He just couldn't.
It wasn't. How about Arturi Lehkonen getting like demoted / benched for Team Finland? That's not what that was with Tkachuk. That was literally he could not go. His groin wouldn't let him skate. I honestly think if Matthew Tkachuk wasn't banged up, I think Team USA would have won that game.
Quinn Hughes not being available hurts. But Quinn Hughes is the second best defenseman in the world after Cale Makar. He's that good, and him not being able to play hurt you. Tage Thompson being kept off this roster is insane. Tage, 28 goals, big body, 6'6". You keep him off the roster, and then on the opposite side of the height and size spectrum, you leave 27 goals back in Canada. Cole Caulfield doesn't make this team? In what world is that goal scorer not available to you? Like,
Well,
I would have put him over the team over Jack Hughes. Jack Hughes was a ghost.
well, dude, Jack Hughes was a massive disappointment. Man, that player looked so promising a couple years ago, and even for the Devils is leaving a little something to be desired. I wonder, Pietrangelo opted out of this thing, even though he was hurt, but he was also playing games for the Golden Knights. I wonder, maybe Quinn Hughes he's a little nicked up before the break. So he says, hey, I'll sit these games out. I don't need to play in this Four Nations thing. But then they're watching at home. They're watching on their couch. I don't even think the players themselves were 100% sure if this was going to be an all-star game type thing or if this was going to be the real deal. And I think Quinn, now he's sitting on his couch thinking, shit, yeah, I was hurt. I was hurt. I shouldn't have been hurt. I could have played in this thing. I wonder if some players misjudged what it was going to be, and now it will be a full-on roster assault for the Olympics.
Yeah, there's going to be a few, like maybe Luke Hughes makes it as a defenseman. Maybe Keandre Miller makes it as a D-man. Is John Carlson still available and still, I mean, he's old, but like maybe Seth Jones has a renaissance if he gets moved to another team and people look at him as going, oh, you're not number one, but you're a really good number three. Maybe Seth Jones is a guy who could make that roster. Colorado's own Troy Terry as a forward, right? Like there's a possibility that he could be one of those last few forwards in if he takes the next step in Anaheim over the next couple of years. I haven't even mentioned guys like Jason Robertson or Alex DeBrincat, who Robertson being kept off was a little odd to me. DeBrincat has had a couple of down years in recent years, especially after signing in Detroit, has been not the same player he was in Chicago. Those are guys that could certainly make the American roster in Italy. Canada is going to be great. Canada is going to have Braden Point, McDavid, Marner, Crosby, McKinnon. Sam Reinert going to be on that team. Bedard probably makes it. I think Macklin Celebrini at this point is a lock to make the Olympic roster next year. I think he's a wonderful hockey player. Robert Thomas. Is Mark Stone still viable next year? Probably, because he's so good as a D-man. I think the Canadian blue line is not given enough credit for being as good and as deep as they are. The American blue line, I think, was over-credited a little bit in terms of its depth. Taves and Makar are there. Theodore and Pietrangelo are there. Thomas Harley probably makes the team. Drew Doughty still very clearly has a couple of miles left in those legs. The issue with the Canadian spring is going to be who's going to play goalie. And I think the answer is here in Colorado.
He would be my leader in the clubhouse. Man, Logan Thompson though. Logan Thompson today, I think he improved to 25-2 on the season. 25-2. And look, Jordan Binnington, he's a good big time performer, whether it's the playoffs, the Stanley Cup Finals, or now international play. When the lights are bright, Jordan Binnington does play well. I had heard that the reason that Logan Thompson didn't make the team is, Bruce Cassidy, Pete DeBoer coached him with the Knights. They were both assistants for Team Canada, and they didn't get along with Logan Thompson. They didn't like him. So that's why Binnington was your guy instead of Logan Thompson. But maybe look, Mackenzie Blackwood I think he gets on the roster. I think he earns it. I really do. And then I'm excited to see Val play for Team Russia.
I don't know if the Russians are. I don't think the Russians are allowed to play in the Olympics next year.
They can't play in the Olympics?
I'm almost positive the Russian Federation is barred from the Winter Olympics next year.
Oh my gosh.
I think you have to wait to see a Russian national team until the NHL runs the World Cup of hockey in its next iteration, either in 2027 or 28. I'll look that up right now. I'm almost positive the Russians are
Yeah, I
not
can't
allowed at the
remember. I know
Olympics.
that, they let the Russians play in the tennis tournaments. But yeah, I can't remember Olympic stuff, if they're banned from that or not. They might be. You might be right about that, actually. But while you look that up, I am also excited. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
They are potentially banned. It is not confirmed or denied, but the fact that that war is still ongoing, the fact that the Russian Federation is coming off of the ugliness of the doping scandals in the 2010s, man, I I can't guarantee they're going to be there. Maybe there's an Olympic athletes from Russia thing, right? When they won Olympic gold 4 years ago, like I guess they could do that again.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously Russia, they act a fool a lot. That being said, I still want to see Val play for Team Russia just from a pure sports standpoint. I'm also excited, hopefully, fingers crossed, to see Gabe Landeskog play for Team Sweden. That would be awesome. And that is a hilarious comment by Hemopolis. Maybe Val can play for Team Colombia.
I don't
That's a
know if they
hilarious comment.
I don't know if Team Bogota is going to make the Olympics, man.
Just hey, move there in the off season.
Team Medellin. That was funny. That was
One
funny.
man can.
I don't think it's as on point as you think it is, but I think it's funny. That's how
But
I'll
yeah,
put that.
I think Sweden. If Gabe Landeskog would have played in the Four Nations for Team Sweden, they would have beaten Canada in that comeback that they had in Game 1. They would have won that overtime if Gabe Landeskog had played. And that's another thing. There's no guarantee that we are getting USA Canada in the finals of the Olympics or any other international tournament coming up. There's no guarantee that that's what everyone wants, but there's no guarantee.
I said it in the open of my broadcast. We are about to embark on the greatest decade of international hockey that we've ever seen. There is no other point in time where there are 5 nations that could legitimately win gold at the Olympics. 5. And I think there's probably a 6th in there that you could go, if they get hot, watch out. And those are the 4 that played in the 4 nations: Finland, Sweden, Canada, America. Any one of those 4 countries can win gold.
Well, it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun to watch. It's fun to be talking international hockey,
That's
uh,
awesome,
to
man.
to be mixed in with our Avs talk and our NHL talk. So good times right now,
Yeah, I'd
in
rather
hockey
talk about
world.
I'd rather talk about this than a 2-1 regular season game lost to Nashville, which is,
Oh, without a
it's
doubt,
frustrating, but it's not going to matter. Like, it just doesn't.
without a doubt.
I knew this game was going to be so boring, man. Like, there was no way this thing was going to be fireworks and the Avs just firing all There's no way. Look at the other game that happened tonight. There were 2 games that had 8 goals scored by one team in them tonight. You knew it was just going to be either sloppy crap hockey or 2 teams just like kind of getting back into it, but passes aren't working. It was just crap. Tomorrow is going to be better. It'll be way better tomorrow.
St. Louis
All right,
tomorrow.
Spring.
St. Louis just lost in a shootout
Oh,
to
I
the
like that.
Jets.
St. Louis had to play extra hockey. I love that. Those are
Yep.
good. That's good news for the Avs. You had to play extra hockey. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. We'll get more into the trade deadline. It's coming up soon, but we will have more fleshed out thoughts about who we think the Avs can get, who we want them to get, who we think that they would have to trade certain packages. Those will come in the ensuing games. If they've got a bunch of space to get, McFarland and Sakic have already said they're not done moving, and I still think it's not going to be. I don't think it's going to be Lars Eller that comes to the Avs. I think there's one more big time swing that you're going to see McFarland take a crack at this thing. I really do. All right, Spring, I'm going to get out of here, and we'll be back tomorrow sometime around 7 p.m. Thanks, guys, for being back. Between the Pipes returns tomorrow evening after Avs and St. Louis Blues. Thanks for joining us. Avs lose 2-1. We'll see you on Sunday afternoon.